Richard Thornton stood in his elegant dining room, wine glass trembling in his hand, staring at the two identical report cards on the mahogany table. Both bore the same crushing grade, F. His twins, Daniel and Emma, sat before him in their navy blazers with gold trim, their prep school uniforms pressed to perfection. They looked down at their hands, unable to meet their father's eyes. "How?" Richard's voice cracked. "How is this possible? The tutors, the study programs, everything I've given you." In the doorway, Grace Henderson stood quietly. She'd worked for the Thornton family for 12 years, ever since Richard's wife Margaret had passed. The children had been only 5 then. Grace had watched them grow, had been there for skinned knees and nightmare, for birthdays and tears. She saw something in this moment that Richard, in his pain and confusion, could not see. "Mr. Thornton," Grace said softly, her calm voice cutting through the tension. "May I speak with you privately?" Richard turned to her, exhausted. "Not now, Grace, please." "Sir," she said, with the gentle firmness only years of trust could allow, "it's important. It's about the children." Something in her tone made him pause. He'd known Grace long enough to recognize when she had something vital to say. He nodded toward his study. The twins watched them leave, Emma's eyes filling with tears, Daniel's jaw clenched tight. In the study, Richard sank into his leather chair. "Grace, I don't understand. I've given them everything, every advantage, every opportunity Margaret and I never had." Grace took a breath. She'd kept this secret for a long time, honoring the children's plea for privacy. But watching them struggle under weight they couldn't carry alone had become too much. "Mr. Thornton, when was the last time you sat with Daniel and Emma? Not to discuss grades or schedules, but truly sat with them?" Richard blinked. We have dinner together every evening." "You have dinner in the same room," Grace said gently. "But you're always on your phone, reviewing contracts, planning the next business meeting. When do you talk to them about their days, their worries, their dreams?" Richard opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. He thought back over the past weeks, months. She was right. "Daniel has dyslexia," Grace said quietly. "And Emma has severe anxiety that makes test-taking nearly impossible for her." The words landed like stones in still water. "What? Since when?" "Why didn't anyone tell me? Daniel's been struggling with reading since 2nd grade. He hides it well. Stays up until midnight decoding assignments that take other children an hour. Emma's anxiety started after Margaret passed. It got worse as the academic pressure increased." Richard felt the room spinning slightly. "But the tutors would have noticed. The tutors see them for an hour twice a week. They see perfect posture and polite answers. I see them at 3 in the morning. When Daniel is crying over a page of words that swim and dance. I see Emma having panic attacks in the bathroom before tests. Why didn't they tell me?" Richard's voice was barely a whisper. Grace's expression softened with compassion. "Because you were grieving too, sir. In your own way. You buried yourself in work, in providing for them. They saw how hard you were trying and they didn't want to burden you. They thought if they just tried harder, pushed through, they could make you proud without adding to your worries." Richard put his head in his hands. All this time, he'd thought he was being strong for them. Instead, his strength had become a wall. "They asked me not to tell you," Grace continued. "They were afraid you'd be disappointed, that you'd think less of them. But I can't watch them hurt themselves anymore, trying to be perfect for you." "Disappointed?" Richard looked up, his eyes red. "They're my children. My whole world. How could they think?" He trailed off, realizing the answer. How many times had he mentioned their grades at dinner? How often had he compared them to colleagues' children? Not from cruelty, but from fear. Fear that without pushing them, he was failing Margaret's memory. Failing as a father. "What do I do, Grace?" "You talk to them," she said simply. "You tell them what you just told me, that they're your whole world. Not their grades. Not their achievements. Them." Richard walked back to the dining room slowly. The twins still sat there, looking smaller somehow in their formal uniforms. When had they started looking so tired? When had the joy left their eyes? He sat down across from them and did something he hadn't done in years. He pushed the report cards aside without looking at them again. "Daniel, Emma, I need to apologize to you." Both children looked up, startled. "I've been so focused on giving you everything. I never had that. I forgot to give you what you needed most. Me." My time. My attention, not my expectations. Emma's lip quivered. Daniel's eyes widened. Mrs. Henderson told me about the dyslexia, Daniel, and the anxiety, Emma. I'm so sorry that you felt you couldn't tell me, that you felt you had to struggle alone. Dad, we didn't want to disappoint you, Daniel said, his voice cracking. Disappoint me? Richard reached across the table, taking both their hands. You could never disappoint me. You're kind, thoughtful, creative. You're exactly like your mother in all the ways that matter. I've been such a fool, measuring you by grades instead of character. The dam broke. Both children started crying, and Richard came around the table, pulling them both into his arms the way he used to when they were small. We tried so hard, Emma sobbed. I study and study, but when the test comes, I just freeze. My mind goes blank. And the letters jump around, Daniel added. I feel so stupid. You're not stupid, either of you. You're brilliant in ways that tests can't measure. And we're going to figure this out together. No more hiding. No more struggling alone. They stayed like that for a long time. The three of them holding on to each other in a way they hadn't since Margaret's funeral. Grace watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her own face. This was why she'd stayed all these years. Not for the salary or the comfortable room, but for moments like this. For the chance to help a broken family find its way back together. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Richard cut back his hours. He found specialists for Daniel's dyslexia and a wonderful therapist for Emma's anxiety. But more than that, he was simply present. He sat with Daniel in the evenings, using colored overlays and special fonts that made reading easier. He practiced breathing exercises with Emma, teaching her tools to manage her anxiety. The grades didn't transform overnight, but something more important did. The house filled with laughter again, with conversation, with life. One evening, 3 months later, Daniel came home with a B- on a history paper. He'd worked for 2 weeks on it, using every tool and strategy they'd learned. I'm proud of you, Richard said, and he meant it with his whole heart. Thanks, Dad. I'm pretty proud of me, too. Emma started sleeping through the night. Her smile, the one that reminded Richard so much of Margaret, returned. And Grace? Richard gave her a raise, though she protested she didn't need it. More importantly, he thanked her. Not just for telling him what he needed to hear, but for loving his children all these years, when he'd been too lost in grief, and feared to love them properly himself. You saved us, he told her one quiet afternoon. No, sir, Grace said with her gentle smile. You saved yourselves. I just held up a mirror so you could see what was already there. Love. It was always there. You just needed to remember how to show it. That evening, Richard sat at dinner with his children. His phone turned off and put away. They talked about their days, their hopes, their fears. Daniel mentioned a girl he liked. Emma talked about trying out for the school play. And Richard listened. Really listened. Not to judge or fix or plan, but simply to be there, present in the moment with the two people who mattered most. Outside the window, the evening sun cast golden light across the dining room. Grace brought in dessert, catching Richard's eye. He nodded his thanks, and she nodded back. Some secrets needed to be told. Some silences needed to be broken, not with anger or judgment, but with love. And sometimes, the greatest gift you could give someone wasn't success or achievement or perfection. Sometimes it was simply permission to be human, to struggle, to fail, to be loved anyway. That was the secret Grace had known all along, the secret that saved them all.